I just think they're a great set of records, which, whilst normally you would cover them under more advanced genealogy, but they are so useful to us.
Yeah.
And they're so relevant when we're thinking about what's happening in the current circumstances.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we've seen so many examples online, on television, in the newspaper, of the communities coming together to gather food to help their neighbours, to help the community, to deliver food to people that are shielding. And you look back a couple of 100 years, it's something that's carried on.
Yes, I mean, the charitable organisations, many of the charities that we think of nowadays, for example, Society for the Protection of Children, are a 19th century creation. They didn't spring up in the 20th century. A lot of our older charities, particularly if you look at the word royal on the front, they might have got that royal a bit later, but a lot of them are 19th century, or they may have changed their names. Bernardo's, Warriors, they grew out of 19th century institutions because there was a recognition, particularly attitude towards children, where their parents couldn't support them or they didn't have the money to look after foundling children, attitudes towards what would be brackets as fallen women. Obviously, prostitution is certainly not on the numbers as it was in the 19th century when it was a legal profession. But attitude, there was recognition that people could be addicted to drugs, opiates, drink in particular, the huge rise of the temperance movement in Scotland, and also the feeling that landlords should be, are they suitable landlords? You'll get that in the local newspapers, attitudes towards the providing of drink, and that we should almost keep the poor from having drink, because if they had drink, they were liable to misbehave, or get addicted to that substance. Yes, there was an emphasis very much, as I say, on the deserving poor. It's not your fault. Society should be there to support you. Very evangelical Christian movement, which was huge in the 19th century. And that's part of being what was seen as good Christian, or if you want to call it Samaritan, was go and support, or either provide money or give. Not very many people necessarily get involved with direct action, but they would give money. And this is where you see a change, particularly later part of the 19th century and into the 20th century, that people giving in their will, beginning to give money to charities, which in the past wouldn't have happened. You kept your money within the family. You didn't necessarily give it outside the family. But this, social responsibility, and which happened partly, I suppose, if you think the landed aristocracy to an extent, apart from out of it with clearances, a lot of them, they felt slightly, well, I've got to look after, my workers on my estate. Yes, the clearances were terrible, and certainly what Patrick Seller did up in the Caithness, the Duchess of Sutherland, the famous statue out above Gospey, which some people would like to blow up. And that was a bit very different. But if you look at where they survived the Kirk Session records for that area, or the and the building of the fishing villages in places like Hermdale, Brora, Ullapool, to support these communities who were being removed from the land, or give it, or in some cases, encouraging migration to places like Canada, Newfoundland, and so on.
So, as with any record in Ancestry, it leads you down one road and then it leads you down to another.
Oh, it does. I mean, do not treat it as an individual thing. Find something, and that leads you on to something else. And it helps build up this picture. Because that's what we want to do. To say, if I hadn't looked at that poor law records, I would not know that Catherine ends up in the Highland Asylum for 2 years, for a year, until she recovers and then was released. I almost certain this was my granny's aunt. My granny didn't know anything about it. She might have been shocked that I could go and find out one of our relatives ended up in an asylum, but nothing to be ashamed of.
No.
Don't be ashamed of your ancestors. They're not human beings.
And that's going to the asylum. That's stress and anxiety. That's that's depression. That's whatever it
is. I mean, you very rarely read of the poor getting depressed. You may read of suicide more in newspapers, or possibly in death certificates when you get the cause of death, and it says suicidal hanging. Nowadays, you can kind of twig it's a suicide, but they won't put suicide on a death certificate. You can kind of look and see what the cause of death is. And you can go, oh, yeah, that's a suicide. And then 19th century and early part of the 20th century, they would put suicide. They would put, but you're generally, mental health is the whole attitude towards mental health at home is a hidden subject. We know about the people who ended up in asylums.
You could argue that tradition has, albeit we're speaking about it more, you could argue that that's maybe continued. Yeah.
It is. I think the hidden health problem, digressing from family history into slightly.
I know. This isn't. I mean.
But it is. But we have to think of our relatives living in communities. Where did the support mechanisms come from? And as I say, this is one of the things you're looking at, these oral records. And they are a support mechanism. And that both financially, and sometimes, as I say, if you look at the succession records, it could be in the shape of coal or food, or with orphans, they're getting clothes, or even with old people, if they say, so many shillings to buy a shawl, or to provide clothes, or sometimes even with a workman who's lost all his tools, buying new tools. So that it was as if we think of the 20th century as being this period when support mechanisms were huge, and yes, the state came in huge support mechanisms. And nowadays, what's going on? But this came out partly out of our history of the 19th century, where that had come from the older church. But the church initially did the thing. Then the parishes, the most parochial board, and the parishes, the parochial board, and the local authorities providing the support to the poor. And it's these local authority records. And remember, you're dealing with local authority records in local archives. You're not going. National Records of Scotland has some records. You'll have a look at the catalogue. And I know there's some stuff for Fife, Midlothian, but by the bulk of them are in local archives records. And that's where to look. Have a look at stuff like Scran, which has listings, but also just simply type in the name of the county and look at, as I say, if you want to know all the Scottish poor houses and Scottish almshouses, have a look at sites like workhouses.org, thing to use. So say, I would slightly ignore the bit about what records are available, but certainly, if you want to know, was there a workhouse for your particular parish or area, or what combinations, it's very useful, because something was there a workhouse or poorhouse in my particular area.
Yeah. That is a vast amount of knowledge you have shared with us, Ken. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
so next time we're thinking about, is it military records we're thinking about next time?
Yes, I mean, I know it's the Second World War, but I think availability-wise, probably more to talk about the First World War.
No problem.
And partly, we'll see what if anything comes out this weekend. Being VE Day, yeah, in Europe. So I think it should be VJ Day. We should have waited for, but that's a personal thing. Yeah,
that's great. Thank you so much, Ken. That's brilliant.
Okay. Cheers for now.
Thank you.